talk about rehabilitating people and helping people to awaken spiritually, you got to get the brain working right first. There's a part of them that is always in the background, witnessing, watching, just being there. And it is inevitable that if they will practice meditation, they will find that part of themselves, and that part of themselves will change their lives. People have to have faith in themselves, that they have everything within them. They have a potential within them to heal, to experience profound joy and bliss in their lives. They just have to start turning inside to find it and stop looking for it out here everywhere. If it's not out here, believe me, it's an internal thing that happens.
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or one-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy. Beautiful. We're recording. Marty, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guy. I really appreciate being here with you.
First question I ask, if you were on an airplane next to a complete stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
I'd say that's the elevator speech that we're all deadly afraid of. I would say, I fix people's brains.
Yeah.
And then from that, there's a lot.
Yeah. How do we then end up with a damaged brain in the first place? If it needs to be fixed?
Many contributing factors. Genetic factors. There's ancestral trauma, so trauma that has gotten passed down in our DNA. There's, developmentally, when we're in the womb, our brains are being formed by our environment, by our mother's stress level, by what's going on in her life. And then after we're born, the brain is neuroplastic and it is being modified by the environment. So if we are in an environment that is challenging or stressful or provokes fear, particularly safety for an infant, that begins to set up certain pathways in the brain that may precipitate problems later on in life. There's something called the ACEs score. ACEs is a acronym, stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's just 11 questions from being abused to witnessing abuse to being in a household of alcoholism to being neglected. And there's a direct correlation between the higher the ACEs score, the more likely that person is going to experience pretty bad consequences, everything from criminal behavior to drug or alcohol addiction to cardiovascular disease. So we are being modified by our environment all the time. And you say, how does brain injury come? Well, there are obviously overt brain injuries from a concussion or a blow to the head, but it's the developmental injuries that cause the most problems. And by that, I mean, whether it's witnessing trauma, being, stressed or neglected, all those things produce problems in the brain. In San Francisco, there's death row down there in one of the prisons, and something 95% of those prisoners have overt brain trauma or brain injury. That's not to say, to blame their behavior on the brain injury, but certainly there's a correlation. And even, prisoners who don't necessarily get to death row, many of them have injury, whether it's from a concussion or from drug or alcohol use, which will also cause brain injury. So these things, I realized many years ago were factors that influenced our development, and that when we talk about rehabilitating people and helping people to awaken spiritually, you got to get the brain working right first. The brain has to be able to process the information, and you have to get out some of these old patterns that get stuck in there. We call them pathologically stable patterns that keep recreating our old behaviors that we can't seem to break free of. And that, so when I say I fix brains, that's what I do. I
Wow.
look at the brain, I look at the problems, I check out where do you want to go in your life, and then we sort of take aim at that. And the brain is malleable. We can push it this way or that way. No, I shouldn't say push, but guide. And it's a process that's happening all the time. 10, 15 years ago, it was relatively unknown, but now we know the brain is plastic. It is always modifying itself to the experiences that we go through.
Well, so essentially, if we then start to improve the hardware, the software will run smoother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the software and the hardware in this sense are not that divergent. It takes good hardware for that software to run right, and vice versa. If you get hit in the head with a golf club or a baseball bat, your hardware and software aren't going to be working right for a while until that injury is healed up. So I hardly ever separate the two anymore. To me, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And through your experience over the years, then when you speak of neuroplasticity, because I've often heard, is it Hebb's law? Neurons that fire together, wire together, and what don't fire together, unwire. So
Yes.
essentially, then is what you're saying is that if we are able to, I guess, I always think of bobsleigh tracks,
Yes.
and if you keep sliding down and carving out the same one, the next thing you know, you'll slip straight down there on the bobsleigh.
Exactly. And the problem is the older we get, the deeper those grooves. The more times that bobsled runs down those grooves, it's going to get deeper and harder to get out of. There's a network in the brain called the default mode network, and it's useful. The default mode network organizes the brain so that we don't have to think about everything. We don't have to think about brushing our teeth, about driving our car. But it's automatic, and at the same time, we don't have to think about those automatic things. We don't think about our behavior. We don't think about our judgments. We don't think about our attitudes, because the default mode just says, look, this is the way it's always been. This is the way you're always going to do it. So breaking out of that default mode is very important, and that's the grooves. When we look at people like advanced meditators, Tibetan meditators, guess what? Their default mode quiets down, and we can actually teach the brain to do that. In meditation as well, it quiets down. Then what does that mean? Well, it means you become more present. You become less driven by the patterns and the default mode networks and all this wiring in the brain. But that's an absolute truth that the more you use these pathways, the more intact they're going to become. And that includes pathways that have to do with love and compassion, and pathways that have to do with anger and hate. The more they are used, the stronger they get.
Yeah, for sure. So a question that just popped in there, because I think about trauma as well that's been held in the body. And, there's that amazing book, The Body Knows the Score, I believe.
Keeps the Score. Bessel van der Kolk. Excellent book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how much then are we working with the brain to influence the body? Because if trauma is held within the body as well as the brain, because
yes,
there's a question in there somewhere.
Well, yeah, no, there's no doubt. And what I found over 40 years is we do both. I believe in body work. I went to chiropractic university 35 years ago. I'm not a chiropractor, but I firmly believe in that type of body. But I also believe in, acupuncture, acupressure, deep massage, somatic work, trauma relief. I mean, all these are very important because, as you said, the title of the book says it all. The body keeps the score. It does, every cell. So we can speed up the trauma recovery process quite well by adding some kind of body work. At the same time, getting the brain structures to reorganize themselves.
Yeah.
Now, the brain structures, like I get people post-stroke, And you can wake up certain areas of the brain with this. But I always want those people to be getting physical therapy or occupational therapy too at the same time. Because, the stroke isn't happening out here in the body, right? It's happening, in this case, in the left arm. It's up here in the sensory motor ridge. And so we can get this part of the brain working better and at the same time train the body to make the connections better.
Got you. Where does your passion come into all this? Because you're very passionate about the work. And I was listening to a little a radio interview of you yesterday while I was cooking, actually, just getting ready for today. And you spoke of that you got up 3:30 a.m. to meditate daily.
Yeah.
And instantly, and I can relate to that. You know, I'm not 3:30. I'm 5:15. But, but
go to bed earlier.
I do go to bed early. Yes, yeah. And I remember if I'd heard that 10 years ago, I think, what is this guy nuts? You know, like.
That's what my wife thinks.
But there's clearly a deep passion and your own self-realization around the work and why you do that and to have a practice like that. So I'm fascinated.
Okay. Really. You want me to tell you how that started?
Please. To give people context to why, and then even then why we do that today.
Yes, there's no doubt I'm on a mission, and you'll see why in a few minutes here. So I was born and raised in New York, outside of New York City. And in my adolescence, very young, actually, I started using drugs and alcohol. And by the time I was 16 or 17, I was into hard drugs, got addicted, very bad. My father died in the middle of all this. And I was in and out of 7 drug and alcohol chemical dependency treatment centers, none of which really did anything except made me a little more crazy. And finally, when I was 21 years old, October 1978, I had a spiritual experience. People say, "Oh, what was it?" Well, I surrendered, let go, and I know you've had similar experience. And in a very short time, maybe as far as I could tell, it lasted 90 seconds. There was a complete turnaround, sort of a sudden awakening that there is a presence here. And the presence is here, and it's in here, and it's in everybody. And that presence is guiding this whole thing we call creation along. And at that point in my life, I had overdosed several times, ended up in ICUs on pumps and ventilators and all that. And so when this hit me, I realized that I had been, not that I'm anybody special or unique, but I had been spared. I for many intents and purposes, I could have passed away several times by the time I was 21. And I kind of accepted that back then. But anyway, so the spiritual awakening happened. And I didn't have a home at that point, but I realized very, very quickly that I had to give back. I had to do something to share what I experienced. This is how many of the different treatment processes get started. Somebody has a profound experience and they want to share it with the world. And I didn't get the Messiah complex or anything, but I knew I had something that if it could heal me in my life, it could heal other people. So I went back to school, was able to get back into university. Even with all the drug use, I still have a good intact intelligence. And I ended up in Georgia attending chiropractic university. And I only stayed there about 2 years. I felt like it wasn't quite for me. Kind of like you, I was more towards this internal process. And I went to a meditation retreat center. I was raised Catholic. I went to a Benedictine monastery, but I decided I liked the yoga philosophy, more than I did the Benedictine rule, which was pretty rough. So I lived at this ashram / meditation retreat center. And the spiritual director, who was my mentor, my guru, was a disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, the fellow who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. And he was the last living disciple. And he used to start work at 2 a.m. So I started sort of getting in this habit of getting up very early to meditate. And there was this beautiful meditation hall there, and I would go there on my own. And I know meditation is a challenge for many people. I can't. I hear many things like I can't meditate. My mind won't shut up. Well, that happened in the beginning, but then, if you, it's why it's called a practice. You suddenly hit something, which I did in the first year of living there, and meditation became this profound attraction for me, where I would just sit and the process would start and happen by itself. So, 40 years ago, I started this habit of getting up at 3:30, sometimes 4, and meditating for a couple of hours a day. And it's never left me. My entire life really revolves around that. It's not, I like to say my life revolves around my meditation versus meditation revolves around my life. Because it's so rewarding, it's so powerful. It's a communion, with this divine presence that is incredibly healing. And I like to keep myself as clear as possible for the clients that I work with. And I think it's really important for practitioners, and I know you know this, to be as centered, as clear, as spiritual as they can be in their own being, because that is what really brings the healing process to their clients. And, I've worked with tens and tens of thousands of people across the spectrum. And I still teach meditation. We have 1/3 of our office is actually a meditation hall. But I just can't say enough about meditation as a practice for, sort of finding our own sense of spirituality and then allowing that to come out from us and manifest.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
When you had that awakening, would you have found yourself, do you think, at the meditation school at some stage if you hadn't had it? Because quite often it's challenging, isn't it? Because the biggest challenge I found is I started having these experiences, and they were accelerating, and it was making me realize that we're much more than what we've bought into the physical aspects of ourselves, and you want to share it with the world. But only if people are ready to hear it, of course.
Yes.
And it's like, how do I ignite the fire in that person? Because you can feel so compassionate for the pain or the suffering that they're in that moment. Like, if you just could just peek 2 degrees to the left and you're there, kind of thing. And it was a struggle.
That's a great challenge. And, honestly, I would not have lived much longer had I not had that spirit. It's like,
okay,
I needed the baseball bat. There's like the wand and there's the baseball bat. Well, at that point, it was the baseball bat. Wake up. And but much of this is destiny. If we have a spiritual teacher and we're truly, we're sincere in our hearts, they will come to us. We will find them, when the disciple is ready, the teacher appears. That's absolutely true. But, and I understand what you're saying about, and what I found, because when I had that spiritual experience, and I had many, many others after that, I wanted to go out and tell it, hey, you know what? You're God. Well, this was in North Georgia. This is, you're from Australia, but North Georgia is pretty rural, hillbilly country. And that didn't go over real well. Finally, my spiritual teacher said, keep your mouth quiet. Just be that awareness, that presence. That's the greatest thing you can do for people. There was a spiritual author of spiritual books, Joel Goldsmith. And he said, it may not be the clients that come to you for healing that get this consciousness from you. It may be the person you walk past down the street. It may be the person at the checkout counter. That's where the healings may really occur. You don't know. But the point is, stay in that consciousness, and it will have this effect on other people. You can't make it. You can't take somebody and wake them up. It's a natural process. It's going to be different for everybody. But what we can do is stay centered in ourselves, be as clear as we can in ourselves, and that will affect the people around. And then they even say it'll affect your family, your ancestry, both backwards and forwards, which is interesting. Many traditions teach that if you pursue this spiritual awakening.
Wow. And then I'm fascinated as well, because I've never spent time in anything like you have in the meditation school, if you call it. I'm not sure. But what was a typical day then? What would you, how would it look? What would you do to ingrain the practice?
Yeah, I would, I'd wake up very early, obviously. And it was 11 acres with various buildings on it, meditation hall, library, guest facilities, and it was a retreat center. It wasn't really a school. And I would get up very early and I would go right into meditation. And my meditation, usually preliminary techniques would be practiced, whether it was, the hatha yoga, the postures and the stretching, pranayama, the various breathing techniques, and the type of yoga philosophy I was studying then was Kriya Yoga, and Kriya Yoga employs specific pranayamas, which are essentially breathing techniques. So I would do them for a while because they were preparatory for the brain. They get the brain in the right, in the right alignment so that you can go into deeper states of meditation. Sometimes I would chant, sometimes do mantras. But if I had 2 hours, that's what I would be doing for 2 hours. Most of that time would be spent in the silence, just perfect quiet, not listening to music, not fantasizing, not visualizing, but just going into that pure silent space and allowing that to permeate my being. Then, after that was done, then it was time for breakfast. And I worked at this particular facility as well. So then I would go to work. Lunch break, I would usually meditate for another 20, 30 minutes. Work again in the afternoon. And in the evening, depending on who was there might be a program, a group meditation, group chanting, group teaching or instruction. And if there wasn't a program going on, then I would just meditate another couple of hours until I started, my head started bobbing up and down, which it would. So, there were times in that environment where I was meditating many hours a day, all cumulatively, not at once. And that's very powerful. You can't do that all the time. But, I was sort of living a monastic, semi-monastic life then, vegetarian food and so on, and avoiding too much, any socializing really, and then also avoiding TV and radio and all that kind of input, just really letting my mind stay focused on my spiritual practices.
Yeah, beautiful. Just to try and put context in for people that haven't had any experiences, what would be the elevator pitch then to going down that route for people? Like, what were you feeling or experiencing from a day-to-day basis from that? Because you say you get excited by going into meditation, you know what I mean? And I know people, I've heard it even said that, like, sometimes as an avoidance, I'm not saying this is, but people have a perception that we're by doing that, we're avoiding life's challenges and difficulties and things like that.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Escapism. It's not a path of escapism. And I was told that by my teacher very early on. This is not a path of escapism. It was really a joining of life. It's a facing reality face to face. It makes you, I can look back now and say this, it makes you more efficient in all areas of your life. And it helps heal a lot of the stuff, like we talked about earlier, the early trauma and the stuff we're not even aware of that we've gone through. It also increases intellectual capabilities. A lot of meditation practices, they've shown, increases the thickness of the prefrontal lobes. And this is where executive function lies. So concentration, attention, motivation, goal planning, impulse control. All of those things are valuable. I would think anybody would want to enhance that in them if they knew they could. And there's a study a couple years ago that showed just 11 cumulative hours of meditation produced measurable increase in thickness in the prefrontal lobes. So it's what we were saying earlier. Brain's neuroplastic, so we can, and I've heard meditation referred to as self-guided neuroplasticity, which is really what it is. So that's why meditation can be so powerful, because you can guide your mind, guide your feelings, guide your thoughts in the appropriate direction. And the payoffs can be enormous. Everything from, what I mentioned about improved executive function to higher and higher awareness of spiritual realities. And that's really difficult to talk about because, it's one of those things, if you haven't experienced, it's like trying to explain what a really good chocolate cake tastes like to somebody who's never eaten one. You've got to experience it to get, to kind of get the feeling for it.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your view on this then through meditation, and we'll dive into neurofeedback soon and everything. But is it what's happening? Because I even heard the quote last night. You said it different. The power that creates us is the power that heals us. And do you think with the meditation practice, by allowing ourselves to get out of the way, to get back to that pure essence of us, the body is then able to recalibrate to its natural homeostasis?
Yeah. Yes, I believe that's true. I think that in a sense, it's a good way to segue into neurofeedback. When we go to these deeper levels of ourselves, there will be a reset, self-regulation, if you will, of the whole system. Because we're just the outward expression of our minds. Minds creates the blueprint, and then it manifests out here. So if we can go there and we can allow the mind to be flooded with this divine consciousness that is supremely intelligent and knows way before we know what we need and what needs to be done, and allow that to saturate us, then that takes care of everything.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So 2 questions for you then. And I guess, what was it like stepping out of that life after a few years? Were you concerned about going back into...
No, I was very grounded in that. And the first thing that I did once I left the retreat center, I went to work, at a psychiatric hospital, teaching meditation and treating clients who were suffering like me. And that was a gift to me. That was, when I look back now, I didn't even realize what a great gift that was for me, that I could immediately start giving back, start serving. That's how we heal our past. We start serving. And that was my mission. And I knew it was, and my spiritual mentor told me, said, this is a great opportunity. And it was a wonderful hospital, very progressive, and a great staff. But that, the meditation has been, the center point for me always. So it's never really changed. I'm living thousands of miles away from that center now, but I'm still involved with it. I still teach meditation. I teach yoga philosophy, higher spiritual philosophies, and so on. That's what I do. It's my life. It's never going to change.
Yeah. So how did you end up then getting into neurofeedback? Like, what was the bridge there?
Well, I started to study meditation and physiologically what happens when we meditate. And back then, there was a couple of good studies out that the transcendental meditation people had published. And, if you look at it, the brain changes. And it's these brain waves that indicate these changes. So I put 2 and 2 together, so to speak. And I said, there is this technology, new technology called brainwave biofeedback, where you can teach somebody to change their brain. And I said, if we can do that, then we can teach somebody how to begin to enter into this process of meditation. And I don't care who they are, what their intelligence level is. If we can aim their brain in the right direction, eventually the meditation process and the healing that I experience can happen. So I started doing that. The hospital fully supported me, and we started a whole program using neurofeedback that ran alongside the regular treatment program. And even though my primary goal was teaching people how to meditate and wake up, the 11th step of Alcoholics Anonymous is through prayer and meditation, I will achieve conscious contact with my higher power. Can't say it any more plainly than that. I was like, well, we have a way we can do this now. But what really started to happen was the patients who were going through the brainwave biofeedback started reporting their depression getting better, their insomnia getting better, their drug and alcohol cravings getting better, their eating disorders, their anxiety disorders, their chronic pain, on and on down the line. And the medical director said, this isn't just for meditation. Look at the results you're getting here. And so that's why when you look at neurofeedback now around the world, you'll see it's being applied for all the things I just mentioned. I still, have this passion about the meditation model. I call it neuromeditation. But neurofeedback is being used for, even athletes are using neurofeedback now. The Italian soccer team all did neurofeedback and then won the cup. There's athletes here in the U.S. The military is using it now for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. The NFL, National Football League here in the U.S., is using neurofeedback for post-concussion. So there's this whole rehabilitative model, but also an optimal performance model as well.
Interesting. So when you hook someone up, I'm assuming you got a cap on.
Right.
And it's measuring points of data. Is that what's happening? And then essentially you can see how the brain, if it's firing correctly or not.
Yeah, we have very big databases now. Just like you have anything you measure in the body, there's like liver enzymes. Your liver enzyme should be within this range. Too high is not good, too low is not good, but this is the ideal range. So we have that data now for 6,000 metrics in the brain, age correlated. So the first thing we do is a quantitative EEG, a quantitative electroencephalogram, where we use a cap, we measure the brain, and then we compare all the activity to a database of other people that age. And from that, we can say, oh, look, this is off, this is off, this is off. And then there's more research that correlates different areas of the brain with different disorders. And I mean, or symptoms. So there's thousands of, anxiety, depression, sleep, high blood pressure, hyperarousal, and that's just to name a couple. And so we can look at those parts of the brain and say, here's the problem. This part is underactive, or this part is overactive, or this part isn't connecting. And then literally from there, it's a training process. Once we've identified it, then the computer, very sophisticated, designs a protocol based on that. It says there's too much of this activity, so we're going to teach your brain to stop doing that. And then it's purely feedback from there. Right now, we're at the stage where we can use videos as feedback. So we'll use, Netflix or YouTube videos that are nice videos. And if the brain is doing the right thing, the video is full brightness. If it's not, it starts to dim. So it's operant conditioning. We're giving the brain a positive reward when it's doing the right thing. You do that for about 30 minutes a session, 20 or 30 sessions, it's amazing what starts to happen. And usually well before the 20 or 30 sessions, people start reporting the changes. I'm sleeping better. I don't have so much anxiety. My depression is lifting, whatever it is they're working on.
Wow. So what else do you give? What else is incorporated in the training then? It's like if I come in for a session.
Yeah, it's operant conditioning. You just sit there with the cap on. The computer does all the analysis, all the analyzing, as well as the feedback. So there's really nothing more you have to do than just watch the video and have the intention of keeping it bright. Keeping the screen bright. And pretty soon the brain keys into that, and the changes start to occur. There's some very remarkable applications being developed now. There's potentially an application for Alzheimer's, pre-Alzheimer's or early Alzheimer's, MCI, mild cognitive impairment as well. We've had some really good results with that. because you're exercising the brain with this. Way back to what you said earlier. If you don't use it, you lose it. Quite literally, the brain will prune out networks it's not using. So this enables us to really do this brain exercise and get all the parts working again.
So essentially, it's not the neurofeedback that's doing the healing; it's the body, and it's just guiding it into.
Yeah, it's totally non-invasive. This is all the person's own consciousness that is implementing the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Now you mentioned you've seen tens of thousands of people over the years.
Yeah.
What kind of results are we talking about from this? What have you witnessed?
Exceptional. It's not a cure-all. Let's be very clear about that. In fact, going back to the bodywork part, what I have learned over the 40 years is who does this help, and then what else do we need to do? Because diet, nutrition, stress management, bodywork, all these things I think are important. But neurofeedback, if you add it and you round out the interventions appropriately, can be miraculous. It can make everything, and I get clients now who've been through everything. I've been here, I've been there, I've spent, all my life savings, and here I am still sick, and I still have this autoimmune disorder, I still have this chronic fatigue, whatever it is. And we get a lot of them. I was going to call my practice the last resort because it was just, I'd like to get people before they went down that road, but that's okay because we can really help people who have have significant issues going on. So it's I can't give you a percentage of how effective I think it is, but in my estimation, and only because I've been doing it so long, we're about 90 plus percent effective.
Wow.
Now I have had cases where, we couldn't get anything. One was a young girl with a seizure disorder, and every time we'd get her brain working better, she'd have a seizure, which was like getting a head injury and go back and that. And I've had a couple of clients who, no matter what we tried, what we did, what counselors we pulled in, we just couldn't get anywhere. So it's not this magic bullet, and anybody who says it is, don't listen to them. You have to. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to the brain. There's a lot to this whole beingness that we have that has to be addressed.
For sure, and I'm guessing it's something that can't be done remotely at the moment.
We were doing that for a while, and that was effective in most cases, especially when we had COVID going on. We were sending out whole systems to people's homes, and they'd sit in their living room and put the cap on, and then we had a therapist who would remotely run the session. That's actually pretty effective. It's just it's not the ideal. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of home units now too, which, are one or two electrodes. There's a few devices on the market. Actually, the market's getting flooded now with them. But again, you have the same problem. Sometimes you need a live clinician there with a lot of experience to say, oh, this is not quite right. It has to be this. So that's important.
Yeah, got you. And one more question while we're on this subject for people listening then, because obviously podcast here in Australia is popular and you're in the US. If people wanted to see someone in Australia, are they good practitioners, bad practitioners? Is it how do you differentiate?
Yeah, that's hard, but I do know there are a couple of good ones, and I've met them at workshops, or they've come to my workshops. I can't remember their names right now. I didn't know you were in Australia. I would have looked them up. But if it is it's a challenging field right now because neurofeedback is very different depending on who's doing it and what equipment they're using. And there are some types of neurofeedback out there now that they're calling neurofeedback that really isn't neurofeedback. So this is a little challenge right now in our field that there's no overall regulation. And I get people calling me all the time, I've looked up this practitioner. Do you know anything about him? And Sometimes I do,
Okay.
but most of the times I don't. But you just Google neurofeedback near me and, check them out, see if you feel okay with them. I think the most important thing is checking their, not necessarily credentials, but their experience. How long have they been doing it for? How experienced are they, and so on.
Yeah, got you. Fair enough. I'm always fascinated as well because I'm passionate about health and wellness anyway. It's in my blood, so I feel like I'm always proactive and looking at different things and exploring different ideas. But as human beings, we tend to wait till symptoms arise. Like it's always the
Yeah,
downstream, that is really manifested into our lives.
yeah.
And I just and it's more just an opinion, really, your opinion. But how many of us out there are actually carrying trauma? Do you think, especially after the last few years that we've endeavored
Car-
through
Carrying
carrying
what?
trauma, within the brain or body,
Oh,
because we're not aware of it. We just go about our lives, and clearly symptoms arise downstream of that manifest into all sorts of problems and
yeah,
diseases, and
yeah,
especially as we get older.
yeah,
And we think, wow, if we could have just been more aware or addressed these things back then. And I believe trauma is a big component
yeah.
of all this.
I think there is obviously these clinical diagnoses like post-traumatic stress disorder, but in my experience, 95 or more percent of us are walking around with that, because it doesn't have to be a big massive trauma. Our third grade teacher could have said we were a stupid jerk or whatever. I'm being sarcastic, but what produces trauma can be very different in different people, and the effect that it has, as you say, can show up way, way down the line. So I'm like you. I prefer to be proactive. I prefer to, mitigate. Live a hygienic life, exercise, fresh air, sunshine, eat right, and meditate, and then do whatever I can to keep my brain healthy. I think that's important. Not to wait for some of these things to catch up on us. Like you say, the body keeps the score. Well, let's even that score out first before it wears us out.
Yeah. And do you encourage I'm guessing you do, but do people generally meditate as well that then come in and do the neurofeedback
Not always, not always. I mean, I have a lot of kids as clients. Kids with autism and attention deficit disorder. If they're open to it, if their parents are open to it, I think it's great. But not everybody. I try to encourage people to start a meditation practice at home, or even just contemplation. Just take a half an hour a day, make that your quiet, inspirational, contemplative time, and just find a place in your home and sit there and just be quiet for a half an hour. I think that's what I'd like to see most people start with.
got yeah. Where do you think this is heading in terms of treatment and outcomes? Do you think that we are going to continually look more beyond just talk therapy and counseling and actually get to the point where we can get our bodies back into this natural
Yeah,
homeostasis?
I think that's coming. I was watching an interview the other night with Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist. He predicted by 2050 that will happen, what you just said, that we will have um, discovered through neuroscience and neurotechnologies that we can, which we're on the infancy of now, that we can change the brain and therefore ameliorate or head off many of these problems later on in life. He took it a few steps further, but you'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Fascinating. Just to wrap up the podcast, Marty, just a
Mm-hmm.
couple of last questions for you.
Sure.
Um, so, what are your general practices to maintain it? I'm guessing it's just the meditation practice. We kind of, I don't know if we actually close that loop, but you get up, you said at 3:30 a.m. and meditate for 2 hours. Is
Yeah,
that
at least
correct?
2 hours usually. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I'll go exercise, and then I go to work very early. Obviously.
Do you get like? do you find the body gets tired from getting up that early, or do you feel more invigorated and charged because you've actually got the meditation
Yeah,
practice?
more invigorated and charged during the day, but I get tired at night. I know my body says, "Oh, you know what? You've been up for this so and so many hours. You need to slow things down." So I don't walk around charged up all the time. Definitely start going downhill at a certain time.
Yeah. Wow. Do you? I'm just trying to frame the question because there's so many intrigues that I live. Because there's a in my life now. I try to do my best to surrender to what is and and be present each day. You know, I got a 2.5-year-old daughter,
Mm,
and I feel so blessed in my life, and I try and do my best to soak up the moments when I
hmm
can, and
hmm
you know, even though challenges arise and it can knock us off kilter.
hmm
Do you have a kind of, I guess, compass or philosophy that you live by that have come out of all these that your experience and practices in life in general? Do you get rattled much these days,
Oh,
or
I definitely get rattled. I try to avoid things that rattle me. Obviously, don't try not to watch the news too much.
yeah,
But I always come back to some of these spiritual experiences I've had where, you know, and that's what it is. It's not a mental construct. It's an experience that there is a divine consciousness or intelligence, whatever you want to call it, that is running the show here. And if we just get out of the driver's seat sometimes and allow it to do what it's kind of like what you just said, surrender, that it will guide us, uh, you know, and our relationships, our situations, our entire lives will be guided by that presence. And the more I can remember to be present and to um, acknowledge that present, the more active that is in my life. So that's really where my practices have led me to now.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Last question. With everything we've covered today, we've covered a lot of ground actually. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
Yeah. So whether anybody knows it or not, there is a part of them that knows how to meditate. If you can get very metaphysical here, there is a part of them that is always in the background, witnessing, watching, just being there. And it is inevitable that if they will practice meditation, they will find that part of themselves, and that part of themselves will change their lives. So I think people, and what I'm really saying, people have to have faith in themselves that they have everything within them. They have a potential within them to heal, to experience profound joy and bliss in their lives. Um, they just have to start turning inside to find it and stop looking for it out here everywhere, because it's not out here. Believe me, it's an internal thing that happens.
Hmm.
So I would just it's amazing because when you start with that awareness, you are guided to the books, to the teachers, to the podcast, to whatever that will, because we don't learn anything from books. We don't learn anything from anything outside of us. It happens in here and in our hearts. That's where we really learn. So I would just encourage people to follow that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about your work? I believe you got a book as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my book is pretty heavy duty. It's philosophical. It's for the initiated. It's called the Brain Sutras: Keys to the Revealed Consciousness. It's actually being re-edited now, but it's on Amazon. Brain Sutras. We have a good website. Wuttke, my last name, WuttkeIPI.com. IPI stands for Infinite Potential Institute. So WuttkeIPI.com has a ton of information on it, lots of video interviews and things written by myself and my wife. So it's not just meditation; it's about healing. And my wife does a very unique kind of sound therapy, and she talks about that. She uses tuning forks. It's very awesome stuff. Talk about body, changing the way the body is responding. So the best thing is the website, I think, because from there you can find all kinds of stuff.
Amazing. Well, as always, the links will be in the show notes for anyone listening as well, whichever platform, so they can click on it and come over and check out your work, Marty. Marty, cool. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Guy.
Enjoyed.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Guy.
Yeah, what a great conversation. Thanks so much, man.
Nice to meet such a comrade.
Thank you.